Welcome, book lovers, back to our bookmark book club, monthly book club. I am Marisa Serafini, joined alongside Phil Svitek, of course, this month of July 2025. We are covering The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. Uh, I really enjoyed this book. Phil, did you enjoy this book?
For the most part, yeah. I thought it was a fun, worthwhile book. It's kind of like a mixture of I'm trying to think, almost like Harry Potter meets Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, it was fun. There was a couple of nitpicks here and there that I had, but for the most part, enjoyable.
Yeah, you know what? When I read this, I think it just one of those books that like resonated really hard with me, and so it stuck with me like a good while after I finished it. I was like, oh, wow, it because I feel like it touches upon a lot of different themes that our universe is still dealing with, when it comes to discrimination, comes to racism, comes to ostracizing, anything that's different from the quote unquote norm is something to be afraid of or something to not or be ignorant of and just like turn the other way and stuff. And I think like we see those recurring themes today, and it's like I have definitely dealt with it. I'm sure you have dealt with it in some shape or form on your end. The world is dealing with it right now. So I think this is a book that I feel like a lot of people should read to understand and have a little bit more empathy just for others being different from the quote unquote norm. So a little bit about this book. It's written by Linus is the main character. It's written by TJ Klune, who has written other stuff. His first book, Bear, Otter, and the Kid, published in 2011. He used to write fiction when he was a kid, and grew up with poetry and short stories, which were published. He also has ADHD, so very neurodivergent, and I definitely relate to that. But growing up, he also experienced with asexuality, queerness, also in his writing, which he infused that into most of his stories. And then he's a big advocate for queer stories and queer authors, which came into this book. This book, I think, really just came on my timeline, mostly because these are the books I love reading. It's books about, caring about other people and having multiple characters intertwined together, learning how to live with each other, learning like bringing out the best and worst qualities of each other. It's fantasy, it's fiction. There's some romance in it, which quite honestly I wasn't really expecting, but I really enjoyed it. Um, and the writing style of this was like third person, really from the perspective of Linus, but the writing's very whimsical and mostly more lighthearted, which I think is it definitely caters to the young audience, the demographic. Um, so getting into the overall the book, like we had this main character, Linus Baker. He's a bureaucrat basically, and he lives a very single life by himself, kind of boring. He's stuck in his ways, just going to work, whatever. He's a caseworker at the department in charge of magical youth. Basically, kind of like your average social worker. But he's given the mission project pretty much by the extremely upper management department, and he is now given this case to go to this mysterious island, which becomes a recurrent theme for us, and basically has to go check out the inhabitants there. It's a bunch of kids, quote unquote. We have the six. They're called dangerous kids, dangerous children, a gnome, a sprite, a wyvern, an unidentifiable green blob, were Pomeranian, and the Antichrist. So, like, put them all together. These children can cause the end of the world. Destruction and chaos abounds. So people are, of course, afraid of them. And so extremely upper management sends Linus to just go on and get a basic assessment of all of them and see like, are these kids still a danger to society? Should we do something about it? let us know, and therefore gets the story going. So overall, Bill, what were your quick thoughts of Linus, our main character? The way that they established him, he seems very like just low on life. He's like, yeah, I'm la-di-da, I'm going to work. And he gets a lot more out of this than what he thought he would get.
Yeah, he's your typical cog in the wheel sort of a character, right? They even literally have a book called Rules and Regulations, which he adheres to. And not only that, he reads quite religiously, almost like the Bible, as if it were for him,
Yeah.
right? So if he's unsure about something, like that's his go-to, before he has his meeting with extremely upper management, he rereads portions of rules and regulations. Anytime he has a question, he reads about that. So I thought he was a wonderful character because he's this nervous Nelly, and I think he's a perfect entry point into the world. And we're kind of introduced to him via another case, and that's kind of our entry point both to him and the world. And so, in terms of him, I think they laid it out very clearly. The one nitpick I did have with the book is that I didn't obviously I understood the rules of the world, but it would have been nice to know, like, when Linus is thrown into this assignment, a level 4 assignment. Okay, I got it. It's bad. But then he's reading the papers about, first and foremost, Lucy, short for Lucifer,
Lucifer.
aka the Antichrist, and he faints from that. Well, it just would have been like nice to know of like what are normal quote unquote abnormal children versus like what I understand Lucifer in and of itself is like a bad thing, but what makes him
Mhm.
different than some of these other, you know what I mean? So I would have just liked to get into the world just a little bit of like what makes this a particular threat versus anything else.
Right. The establishment of just like what do you consider norm and what is, like Lucy, so you brought him up. Basically Antichrist, short for Lucifer, is a 6-year-old boy. Like when you look at a 6-year-old boy at face value, you're like, oh, no, he's not going to be a problem. He's just a child. But apparently, just because of Lucifer's name and his association with something so satanic and evil and devilish and something that can cause destruction, people automatically assume he's dangerous. But when Lucifer, interacts with Linus and stuff, we find out that's like completely not the case. He's just a regular, quote unquote, 6-year-old boy who's like enjoying life. He likes to play jokes and jokes around with people. He has his interests, and he really is just like what you would call a regular boy. And
Yeah, I mean,
so
he
what
busts
did you think of
balls.
that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of them have this sort of abnormality where they bust each other's balls, and given the nature of them, in particular Lucy, his way of busting balls is like, I want to turn your innards outside and then dig you in the grave. And it's like, okay, given the context of how he is, or, who he is, that's a very threatening. But as Linus gets to know him, just like everyone else does, it's an empty threat. It's a joke. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
anything. Um, so in that way, yeah, I mean, it's the typical it's the friends we made I think they even say that line. It's the friends we made along the way, sort of a story. And for the most part it's executed really well. Like I said, it kind of reminds me of Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School, right? Where like, he's thrown into this and has to and that's the thing, like he's meant to be observant and impartial, and that's why he's picked for the assignment, right? Like that much is very made clear. And the reason he can be so impartial is because he quite literally doesn't have a life. He has a cat, but it's not a life.
Right.
Um, and I appreciate like essentially if there is a theme, I mean, there's many things, but is that like no matter what job position you have, whether it's government or not, you can't take the humanity out, you know? Or at least we shouldn't.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and they chose Linus because, like you said, he is the most disconnected from the world. He's disconnected from himself, disconnected from other people. His only relation is with a cat, who even the cat is like, yeah, whatever, you're my owner. But he has no meaningful, deep emotional connections. Therefore, he seems like the perfect candidate to like, so look at these guys, objectively and just give us your general thoughts overall without knowing these people. But then the more time Linus spends on the island and he actually gets to know these people, he actually starts making deeper connections. And it starts to liven him up a bit. He starts to question a lot of things of what he's been doing for work. He's like, why? And, it's like when you finally find some clarity in your life. Like, what have I been doing all along? Like, this is who I work for. This is what I do. Um, and I think, he has a good awakening moment, especially when he has like we had Lucy, he had that nightmare at night. What were your thoughts of how the other children, and we'll get into them, how the other children reacted and how understanding they were of Linus, but also or understanding of Lucy, but Linus also realizing like, oh no, it's not Lucy's fault. And the other children's reaction, just like how understanding they were.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as the other kids go, they were always themselves at every given moment. And it was Linus who kept being like, all right, are they putting on some sort of act for me? And it's like, no, they're not. At every junction, they're not doing this for your benefit. They're doing this because you happen to be here and you can't take yourself out of the equation, right? Like if he could like just be essentially a security camera and observe him that way, I'm sure that would have been initially preferable for Linus, but you can't. And so, if anything, I would make the argument that for the first time ever, this is the most objective viewpoint that Linus has had about anyone he's observed, because he truly sees the kids for who they actually are, as opposed to, okay, this person's 6'4", weigh 150 pounds, interests are this, like that. The idea that there's an objectivity is such a, I don't know, it's a limiting thing, and he recognized that, and so I don't think by the end of the book, I think he figures out like he can still do his job and help kids, right? Like the whole idea was to protect, like he kind of believed in that mission. He was just blinded by like, okay, I here's my parameters and I can't go outside of that. And it's like, no, if the overall goal is to really help these kids, what's actually the best way to help these kids?
Yeah.
And lo and behold, the kids taught him how and what the kids might actually need.
What? I know. And I love the fact that like when they were trying to justify Lucy's nightmare, it's like if anyone else, any other random person saw this moment, they would immediately write Lucy off as a threat because he was shaking the house. Like that could be a really scary slash dangerous thing. But when the kids were justifying, and it's like he can't help who he is. Like, oh, that like they had this level of understanding and empathy. It's like that's just we all have our flaws. We can't shouldn't be like judged upon that or easily written off. And that really like hit hard to me. And I think that was one of the things that really started opening up Linus's eyes. Like, oh no, they're just like regular people. You know, and they have their moments, but you shouldn't be like dictated and defined by like your little bad moments overall.
Well, it's also for Lucy with the nightmare. It's not like he wants these nightmares. They are
Right.
they are exactly that. They are nightmares and equally frightening to him in the moment, right? So he's not getting a pleasure out of this.
Right. He can't help who he is. And as a regular 6-year-old boy, normally he would be scared too. And I think that that adds more humanity to the character of Lucy. That it's like, oh, he's just like everybody else. He has bad dreams. He's afraid too. Let's get into the other characters also on the island. We also had Talia, who is this garden gnome. She spends most of her days outside in the garden, which she's incredibly proud of and takes up, her days and stuff. And she basically mentions and like accepts everyone as family because she doesn't really have any other family. And then we had Chauncey, the green amorphous blob, who no one can really speak to because he doesn't really speak English in like the normal language. He's just there. But his main goal in life is just to be the easiest, nicest bellhop. What were your thoughts of Chauncey? He was he's an interesting character.
Yeah, I think certainly by choosing that, like, he wants to be a bellhop, it's such a thing that none of us probably would ever want to do, right? Um, but for him, that's the greatest joy in life. And so, there's this kind of perspective shift of what we take for granted, our privileges that we don't often see and we ignore. And more so, I would even argue, complain about all the things that we don't get to do. Meanwhile, he's like, I literally just want to be a bellhop.
Yeah.
So, um, it just goes to, if anything, it speaks to the greater context of how unaccepted any of these kids are, where seemingly like a banal job like that is so out of reach, right? And so I think he's representative of that kind of greater aspiration of all of it.
Right. And I think it also shows that Chauncey's way of connecting with people is like people pleasing and serving others. Not in like the bad way, it's just like that's what fulfills him is helping other people. As in something as simple, what we would think as simple as a bellhop, that's actually very admirable. You like for someone who could be deemed scary, the monster under the bed, like the biggest thing in life he wants is just like a very, very maintainable, mundane job. He could pick any other scary job in the world, but he just wants to be a bellhop, which makes him uh more relatable in that sense. He's like, oh yeah, he's just like another human being. We have Theodore, who's a wyvern, which people don't really know. People get wyvern and dragons really messed up a bit, but wyvern, it is a draconid kind of creature. But sorry, I did confuse. Like he's the one who can't really speak well, but he has his own body language in his own self, and he loves to collect buttons and he gives one to Linus, and they connect in that way. What were your thoughts of Theodore?
Yeah. I mean, he's the one I guess I know the least about. Other than that, you know, my entry point obviously is his love of collecting small tangible things, right? Buttons and he's got a collection of other stuff as well. And you know, I'm not entirely sure what it all means, other than, again, just small, simple, everyday objects and kind of the way we take stuff for granted, as a sign of compassion. Like, again, it starts off we're in Talia's garden, and here's Theodore, and he's kind of looking threatening. And Talia's like, "You better give him something, buddy, or otherwise he's gonna kill you," sort of a thing, right? I think that's kind of how
Mm,
it goes. And so he's like, "Oh shit, I don't have anything. Oh, okay, I got a button." And Theodore flies off with the button as if he just gave him like $10,000, right?
right.
So again, it's just that switch up to the appreciation and the things that that they're kind of lacking. And I know we haven't talked about it yet, but remind me when we talk about Arthur. I think this is where Linus does come in, because in many ways, as great of a life as the kids have on the island pre-Linus, Linus helps infuse it with just a little bit more liveliness, for sure, that Arthur was kind of, I don't want to say depriving is not the right term, but they weren't given everything that they could have been, right? And so I think
Right.
Theodore kind of represents a side of that.
Yeah, and I think also Theodore shows that he takes pleasure in little things. He's thankful and grateful for little things, and that is his way to connect to people because he can't connect via language. He connects by emotion, and forms his attachment. You know how like when people have collections, it's usually because of a sentimental value. It's something important to him, and so when they establish the pull button relationship, Linus now has a connection to Theodore and vice versa. So like we're already establishing all these different types of deeper connections under the surface, that Linus never had at the beginning, but like with each character down the line, he's like, oh, he's getting closer to these people, like a lot closer than he ever thought. Some of the other characters, we had Sal, who's the Pomeranian wolf, werewolf Pomeranian shifter. He's the one who looks more like the most like a human being. But because he's such a timid character, like one small fright will get him to shape into a complete different creature. And that's what people find scary is the shape shifting. Um, but when you see him, he's just like the most regular, timid, kind of introverted character. Um, and I thought that's also very relatable too, because a lot of people have a hard time connecting to introverts. They have a harder time connecting to, people, and therefore that's the disconnect where the rest of the society is like, oh, he's also different too. He looks scary, but he really isn't. And then we had Fee, who's also the Force sprite, who brings out a lot of the flowers and makes everything flourish. So like we had the garden gnome and the not to be confused with garden gnome and the sprite, but it's like this is the one that makes like things pretty on the island. And what were your thoughts of Fee? Because she became a bigger character and she interacts with other people on the island too.
Yeah. Um, she's interesting because, there's that dichotomy with Zoe, Miss Chapel-White, right? Who's the island sprite. So they're not quite the same, but obviously Zoe is a big mentor. And a lot of lessons just about the kids really get sort of broken down through Fee. Not that she's intending them that way, but because her and Zoe are similar, and Zoe's essentially trying to always impart some sort of knowledge on Linus, Fee kind of becomes that de facto means to be able to teach Linus, right? So yeah, for sure, Fee has a very, big role to play in all of this. And I don't think it's like outright stated, but in my mind, as I recall it, when she talks about the forest and the trees blooming, right? She brings up that sunflower seed. Well, I forget, it's not quite a sunflower, but anyway, she brings up some sort of plant instantaneously, and Linus is very um, shocked and awed by it. But Fee says, I just listened to the earth, and I said like, hey, if you come out, I'll take good care of you. And so this notion that there's more things to listen to than listening. And as I recall, it was after that that Linus then became able to understand Sal, started making a connection with Sal, and things of that nature. So I think he had a very big role to play in the early parts of Linus's transformation, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like Fee's like the bridge between the adults and the children. Like she lives in the middle where you can understand just about everyone. She's a big thread indeed. We'll definitely get to Arthur, but one more. We had Zoe, like you mentioned, Miss Chapelwhite. She's the island spouse. She's basically like the maternal guardian of the island. She's really protective of the children. A bit bitter because she has now seen the world and how people treats them just because of their differences, and she's kind of given up on humanity. And she's like, you know what? Leave us alone. We're good on the island. And she and herself is a bit disconnected from the rest of society, but she's very protective of these children. And what were your thoughts of Zoe having like this female figure for these children?
Yeah, I mean, obviously she's very motherly, and I think she's a nice balance for Arthur, right? For all these kids, but she also is that other representation, where we have the villagers and the rest of society ultimately that may not be welcoming of these kind of kids. The fact that Zoe, she goes, like, she's the only one who goes to the village and buys the groceries and what they need and stuff like that. So I think she kind of tolerates it, but it's not like she loves any of the people, right? And so she kind of represents that other half of like, okay, well, just because the humans are not very accepting of you, you can't really do the reverse of that. That's not helpful either. So I think that's who she sort of represents, and yeah, it's very interesting because especially at the end, when Linus is leaving, she's kind of really pissed off at both Arthur and Linus. She's like, "Men suck." Not those exact words, but pretty much
Right.
paraphrasing.
Yeah, I think it's also like you gotta love the female, perspective too, because she sees what's going on between we'll bring up Arthur Parnassus. He is the main master and owner of this orphanage and oversees all these kids. He's a more softer man, more nurturing father figure for everyone. And even Zoe's seeing this relationship bloom between Arthur and Linus. And then by what you mentioned, when Linus leaves the island, she's like, "You guys are stupid. Come on. You know there's feelings for each other. Talk to each other. Like, you know this." Like, and she sees it and she gets frustrated in that way. Like you said, men are stupid. It's like, no, no, no. It's like, you guys, come on, just to talk it out. So it's more like oblivious in that way. It's not stupid. She's just like, you guys are oblivious. Come on. Um, what are your thoughts of Arthur? He's a very, very big character, but he also has a very dark background and story for why he's still a part of the island, why he cares so much for these children. And we ultimately find out he's a phoenix. He can form into a phoenix, and his emotions come out when he gets angry. Um, your overall thoughts of Arthur?
Yeah, obviously Arthur's the enigma, right? Like we're told Lucy's background and we're kind of meant to like be fearful of him right away. But it's really Arthur we're always supposed to really investigate, right? Like we know that from extremely upper management. We know that from their correspondences of like, okay, yeah, yeah, great. What about Arthur? They keep asking,
Mm-hmm.
right? Tell us more info about Arthur. And then, when Linus is not really giving it to them, they kind of reveal the fact of who Arthur, quote unquote, truly is. But it's also not really who he is, right? Like, yes, he is a phoenix, but he is also defined beyond that, right? Um, Also, too, this was one of those other moments where I was like, okay, again, if I had just kind of more context about the world, because in my mind, I know what a phoenix is, and phoenix in many ways like represents rebirth and
Mm-hmm.
goodness and all this other stuff. So the fact that line, like for a moment, because they did this thing where sometimes you get information, but Linus knew, and then we go on like a chapter or something like that, but we as the reader wouldn't know. And so in my mind, I'm like, so is Arthur like Lucy's dad? Like, is he Lucifer? Like, what makes Arthur so bad? And then once I learned that, oh, he's a phoenix, I was like, okay, I could see that kind of being bad, but it's not that bad. I don't know.
No.
So that's where the like I had to kind of just check myself like, you know what? I'll just give into the story, but like my initial gut check is like, well, what's so wrong about that?
Yeah, no, and I think I definitely understand that because when I was reading it, they I love the fact that the writer drops like all these hints at Arthur and who he is. Like there's a moment like Linus thought he saw a glowing orange light and then he looked back and then it was gone. So there are like little moments that Arthur's like showing his phoenix side. Um so the more emotional he gets every once in a while it comes out a little bit, but he can basically suppress it, and because his whole life he just kind of got beaten down into the idea that that it was hell. He was a child. He deserved um all this discrimination, and they beat it into him that like he had no choice just to believe his emotional abusers, like that he is wrong, he's always in the wrong. And like it totally makes sense that he becomes like his character is a phoenix, because it's literally the external outbursts. When you see something goes up in flames, when like you suppress something and repress emotions deep down for so long, eventually they're just gonna come out. And for Arthur, it comes out in the physical form of a phoenix. So like that made sense to me. And you saw him getting more and more emotional throughout the book, because Linus is getting closer. He's getting closer and closer to Linus emotionally. These kids are being, affected from the town. So like all these external factors are causing him to really feel his feelings.
Yeah, I mean, would you argue that the reason why the kids have not gone to the village is not because of the kids, but more so because of Arthur and his worry?
Absolutely. I think it's his self-protectiveness. He knows how people treats them just for being different. It's definitely a fear-based protection thing, which I totally understand, but it's not fair to the children to deprive them of society, of just, I mean, he does allow them to go on their daily adventures outside in the island, and they can use their imagination, but to actually talk to regular residents of the mainland, just other people who are the normal human beings, he's protecting them from them. Um, which I understand, but that's also just because he was afraid of people doesn't mean these children would be afraid. And we see it when they go into town. We see Fee really getting along with the that hardware store
You
manager,
mean
and like,
Talia.
yeah, yes, Tal said all these names.
It's Helen.
But
So Helen's the mayor as well as the hard.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like but you see, like these people are a little apprehensive at first, but once they start talking, they're like, "Oh no, you love gardening? Let me show you all the stuff that I have. Like, here's this shovel trowel that you'll enjoy. Here's all this gardening stuff that help them." And then when we see Lucy, because of his nightmare, unfortunately, he destroyed his music collection. So they go into town, and he bonds along with that music record store
Bimbo.
manager. Yeah, and then like
Bimbo.
they just totally, yeah, he was totally stoner, which I loved. But they totally just bonded over music, and that guy, he had no discrimination. He's like, "You love music, I love music, let's talk." And he was super chill, which I loved. And like there was already a level an immediate acceptance there. So it's like you see these kids communicate with regular people, and they're like, yeah, not everyone's going to be afraid of them. Once you get past the maybe the physical feature of something different, you realize when you talk to them, they're just like other human beings too. They love their This guy loves music, this person loves gardening. Human beings, they have their likes and dislikes. You shouldn't be treated any differently.
Yeah.
Um, what let's talk about like a big moment in the book, which is kind of, I equate it to the Beauty and the Beast moment or the Frankenstein moment, when people are like, these kids are dangerous, let's go storm this island and take them out. um and then we had Linus sticking up for these children, and really just like putting them in their place. It's like, just because they're different, who are you to say that um, they should no longer be here on this island? Let's talk about this moment.
Yeah, I thought that was handled really well. It's a typical moment in these sorts of things, but at the same time, the artistry with which it's executed, that's what makes it special. And yeah, the fact that Linus was like, okay, so what do you plan to do? Do you want to kill them? Well, no, we don't want to kill them. Okay, like what do you want to do, right? And by confronting them with like just basic questions like that, it forces them, right? It's that mom mentality is just rah rah rah, go go go, without any sort of thought in the world. And it sounds appealing, um, but even if they did like, even in their heart of hearts, they truly disliked um, those kids. Um, for example, activist Loretta Ross talks about this all the time about like calling in instead of calling out. It's like, okay, what Linus was doing, like, I know he wasn't saying it in this language, but it was essentially the framework of it of like, I know that's not what's in your hearts. So like that's not the character I ultimately know you guys to be, even though he doesn't really know them that well. But it's like, so explain the dichotomy. Why would you be doing this? Why would you be considering this when I know that's not what you want? And when they're confronted with that, essentially mirror, they're like, oh yeah, okay, and they're upset by it because they agree that's not they don't want to be known as murderers and killers, right? So it's a big moment for sure.
Right. And and I love how Linus now at this point, he has established a deeper connection with all these kids and he's standing up for him. And standing up for them. It's like, who are you to say they they don't have a right to exist just because they're different? And I love that moment because, he really puts humans in their place. It's like, he cast the first stone, basically. Um, and this kind of like ties us all together with the extreme upper management. So they're tied to everything. They're tied to Arthur, they're tied to Linus, and they're like this big mystery kind of overlooming people who are like first send Linus on this case, but also trying to find more information. And I felt like more, I don't know about you, but when I was reading it, and they're definitely trying to get Linus to be more detailed in his reports, like tell us more about these children, tell us more about Arthur. It's like they're digging for something. They're digging for information, like the one thing that could literally persecute, like give them everything and like give them the reason to get rid of everyone, which is, also very malicious in their own right. But we find out that Arthur's past, he dated, or like, sorry, going up my notes here, his past former lover, Charles Werner. They had a relationship, and because of there was some betrayal and systemic injustice, and now Charles Werner is the one in charge of the upper extreme management and is like the very thing that Arthur now is against. And it just seems like Charles is still trying to find a reason to take out Arthur and these children. He still has this motive. And he sends Linus in to basically do the dirty work.
Yeah, it's one of those like, hey, essentially we're sending you here. We know what we want out of this report. So in many ways, it's like, I don't care if you make it up, just give us what we want. Is
Mm-hmm.
kind of what he set out to do. Like be detail, they use all the falsities of like be detail oriented, be this, do this, we have concern, blah blah blah. No, you just want a predetermined outcome in your mind. And certainly, like the nice part is Linus was never going to do that, right? The whole point for Linus and why they like again a falsity, but they sent them because he's objective, right? And he is objective, and because he is objective, he started to see the world even more clearly. And yeah, his last recommendation is essentially the two sentences, the standard sentence, and then like I suggest that this, uh, you know, orphanage remains open. And it's like, well, what else do you want? Again, they were upset by it because that's not the outcome that they wanted. But if you sent him truly to assess and make a recommendation, then you cannot be upset by that recommendation. And then he goes into his um, monologue, diatribe, whatever you want to call it. And that's when he's really impassioned. So, like, as powerful as he was with the villagers, he had Helen, he even had Merle kind of chiming in. All Merle was for all the wrong reasons, but he was there. And of
Right.
course, Arthur became the Phoenix and whatever. But there was multiple people at play. This one in particular, it's him kind of against the world. Certainly his old world view. And he stood up to them.
Yeah, and that's what I love. This is where like the character development with Linus is like he started off as a mundane, everyday character, everyday bureaucrat who just like follows the day-to-day rules. But then as he makes these deep connections with these islanders, and then he goes back home when this case is quote unquote done. He goes back home and there's this whole recurring theme of like he's lonely. He doesn't have a family anymore. It's like home, your found family and found home are the people that make you feel like you belong. And now he's back, quote unquote, actually home, and he feels like he's lost. And I really enjoyed that. Well, not to say I enjoyed his pain, but like I really enjoyed learning that these people had such a big impact on him. Uh just for the short month he was there, he's like, oh no. It affected him enough to be like, no, I need to make better connections with people. I need to be around people who actually want to be with me.
Yeah,
And
and also,
therefore,
I mean, in many ways, you can make the argument he got better at his job, right? The idea was to legitimately help kids of this nature. And, he makes the ultimate ballsy move by stealing company documents to become a whistleblower so he can actually save kids because there are some orphanages, as was the case with Arthur, that should have been shut down, right? Arthur as a child when he was essentially abused. And there are, unfortunately, instances like that as he probably looks back on his, cases and others. And then other ones that probably were shut down that didn't deserve to be shut down. So, it's both. Like he found a place to belong, but he also found a purpose to actually help the people
yeah,
he purported to help. So,
yeah. It's like he's genuinely caring about these people to the point where he's going against rules. He's going against the very character and nature who he used to be, to protect everyone. And that's what I love. So like there I did see a big character growth within Linus throughout this book. And you're like, oh, Linus, you do have a heart. You just needed someone to infuse love into you, into him, and like have that like spark those deeper connections that really made him touch upon his humanity
yeah,
and
yeah.
become a whistleblower, which I really, really did enjoy. Any last thoughts about this book?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I thought it was fun. I enjoyed it. Another sort of like Mrs. Pellegrin's Home for Peculiar Kids or whatever it's
Yes,
called,
Miss
something like that.
Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Kids. Yeah,
Yeah. So, and when I make these comparisons, it's not like, oh, they're all the same. No, it's like these are other books that I enjoy, and I'm glad like you can have multiple versions of these. Like that's what makes it fun. There's a place for all of them. Um, and yeah, it was a fun story for sure. Yeah, that's what I got. Very heart opening. Let's put it that way.
yeah, and I think that's why it resonates a lot with stories that I loved. It's like X-Men. You had the school for gifted youngsters because they're all mutants. They're all different, and therefore instills fear upon the people. Same with Miss Peregrine's school. It's like it's that same thing. It's just because they don't appear like your average human being, that is not something to be feared. But once you get to know them, they are just like you and me. And like that's this overall message with all these stories. And I think people need to remember that. Like, if we just talk to each other, we realize we are so much more alike than we are different. Um, so for fun, what books have you been reading since the last time we've met?
Sadly, jack shit.
It's been a
Yeah,
busy summer. Yeah.
yeah, it's probably like a lot of people in the world, just a lot of changes and it's no like secret. It's been public that my company's gone through rounds of layoffs and usually that means three things. One, more work for the people left over, on top of the work that they already have. So that's two things. And then third, it's always like we have new initiatives. Okay, but now we have far less people. So we're doing the day-to-day stuff that we were doing, plus all the other stuff that now there's not people to do, and new exciting stuff that you want to do. Okay, great. Love it. So sadly, I know that that journey is not singular to me, but yeah, so unfortunately I've not had as much time to read books as I would have loved.
Totally understandable. I definitely get that. It's the hustle, man. It's what we do as creatives to keep our jobs, but also keep doing what we love, quote unquote. Sometimes the work-life balance just gets out of balance, and I get it. Uh, Things that like I've already read Brida, which would be our upcoming book for October. Um, Interesting. I'll just say interesting. And I started reading our next book for September, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. So like those are current books for no novels, but I've actually been reading a lot of scripts again. Film and television. Mostly, I just recently read the pilot episode of Penny Dreadful by John Logan. Amazing. So I am reading, but just not in the novel sense, in the written drama sense of television and media, which you and I love. So yeah, it just getting all these different stories in different formats. I love that. So other
Mhm.
upcoming books that we have for the month of August, we'll be reading the biop, directed by James Burrows. Um, I haven't read it yet, but we had the main director, James Burrows. He's most formally known for Cheers, Friends, Will and Grace. It's a different book than we normally read.
Yeah, it's a nonfiction, an autobiography, but we like TV. If you watched any sitcom ever, more than likely Jimmy either directed episodes or certainly his style had a formula. Like I'm sure he probably taught and influenced some of the people that worked on it. Like when it comes to sitcoms, like his handprint is all over so many things. So I'm looking forward to just, a little bit of light, something different. Um, so we have that. And then also we did do an interview with the author of Reckoning of Roku, which we covered last month as far as the book. And Randy Rebuy was the author. So you and I got a chance to spend an hour or so with him talking about the writing process, the book, the Avatar verse. So that's there if you want to go back, if you haven't had a chance to check it out. Your selection, as you mentioned, for September is Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Stephen Dal
Daldry.
Daldry. Brida by Paulo Coelho. Most people probably know him from The Alchemist, but figured, let's do Brida, a different book of his. Then you have a selection for November that is TBD, so we'll figure that
Yep.
one out.
Yep.
But then I can already tell you, so my good friend who's helped me become a better writer, she's an editor, but she's also an author herself, Emily Krempholtz. Her book comes out towards the end of November, I believe November 18th. It's called Violet. Um, why can't I pronounce this?
Just
Violet,
wait.
there you go, is not a villain anymore. So we will be covering that book in December. I figured, what better way to support somebody than to read the book and also talk about it? So,
Absolutely. Fun stuff ahead. Thanks everyone for always reading along with us, discussing all these books, nerding out with us because we love reading. Definitely check out our past library. We're getting up there. Right? We have a lot of books. Our most recent interview with Randy Rebai, really great, articulate speaker. I love speaking to authors. Yeah, just a whole fun selection of different stories, writers, authors, and all that jazz. And everyone can follow you, Phil, at Phil Svitek, and everywhere, just everywhere. You can follow me at Serafini TV. Thanks everyone for joining along, and we will see you for our next book.